live in this very unusual place, a bridge between explaining complex science and innovation and understanding it, and also being very active in explaining things like, hey, this is my perspective on neonicotinoids and why they're better. To do that inserts you into a fight, which to me, I'm highly disagreeable. I like having a conversation, and it's fun for me if you say something I don't agree with and we go back and forth. But when it's writ large, when it's you disagreeing with masses of people about something like whether or not we should use GMOs, how do you keep your mind flat or calm or moving forward? Because the fight itself seems destructive, and you seem to be the type of person that's building something, writing a book or planting crops.
It's a really good question, and I have at times ruined my mental health by getting riled about the things people say about me, the ad hominem attacks and so on, and I tune them out now. I'm quite careful about it. I never read comments on Twitter on my pieces. I mean, I sometimes come across them by accident, but I don't sit down and try and respond to the nutters who attack me. If somebody writes a nasty review of my book, I don't read it. I don't read the good reviews either. I just try and just do my stuff. Lots of people will tell you what's in nasty reviews. I mean, years ago when I wrote Genome, somebody gave it a particularly vicious review in the London Review of Books. Apparently, I still haven't read it. But the number of people who wrote to me saying, I'm really cross about that review of your book. It was outrageous. They got it all wrong and they were really nasty about you. And I would write back saying, maybe, but I haven't read it. And they would say, oh, well, let me get you a copy. No, the whole point is I'm not going to read it. Why should I waste my energy on it? So I think the only way to stay positive, to keep making your own point and not get dragged onto somebody else's point, is to ignore the attacks. Now, if somebody makes a reasoned, polite criticism of what you've said and says, look, I think you've got your facts wrong on this, or please will you think again because of this, then you enter into a debate with them. And I do that all the time. I'm not so blind that I never do that.
Yeah, but you're not a gentle butterfly. I mean, you're a guy that bounces back and forth. I mean, I think that's what makes life so interesting, is to find somebody that you respect and battle them with ideas. Like you walk away from a conversation with a person that is treating you with respect, and they're not like, I want to destroy you for your beliefs, but instead I'm interested in using this data and what I read and what I've heard. Those are the ones that make you come out like excited and having built something, as opposed to just burning it down.
Yeah, exactly. And the argument that's been hardest in this respect is climate change, where I'm what they call a lukewarmer, someone who thinks climate change is real and potentially dangerous, but not nearly as bad as the extremes are arguing, and that we have to be careful that we don't do more harm than good in some of the measures we take against it, because the availability of abundant energy that doesn't destroy the environment in creating it, the energy, is quite important to civilization.
I think you're the one that coined the phrase, or at least I heard it first with you, global greening. Can you describe what that is?
Yeah, well, this is very interesting, because there's a brilliant professor at Rockefeller University called Jesse Orzabel, who I've talked to about lots of global phenomena, and who's got some really interesting perspectives on things. And he let me know one day, he said, the carbon dioxide fertilization effect? And I said, yes. This is that if you put more carbon dioxide into a greenhouse, the plants grow faster, right? That's been well known. It's practiced all over the world. Every tomato grower uses it. They deliberately pump CO2 into greenhouses so they get more crop. He said, well, the satellites are now picking up evidence that this is happening on a global scale because of the increase of about a third in the quantity of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We are now seeing a significant increase in the amount of green vegetation on the planet. And they worked out how to measure the leaf area index of the planet, the total number of green leaves on the planet, if you like, and compare it between one year and another. And he said, go and watch this record of a talk given by a professor at Boston University. It's a publicly available talk, where he discusses how they've done this and what the results are. And they were very striking results. They were that there was a roughly 15% increase over 30 years in the amount of green vegetation growing every spring in the Northern Hemisphere and then disappearing every autumn, if you see what I mean. That's a lot. And this was verified by other data. So, if you measure the rate of growth in a forest, on a small scale, you can pick this phenomenon up. If you measure the CO2 level in the atmosphere, it goes up and down by a greater amount every year than it used to, which means there's more plants pulling it out of the air in the spring and putting it back in the air in the autumn. So I wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal about this, saying, here's global greening. This is a really interesting phenomenon. And everybody came down on me like a ton of bricks. What an idiot I was. I'd misunderstood the study. It was all wrong, and anyway, it didn't matter if it was true, and all this kind of thing. And rarely has there been such a foolish article and Well,
man, just so you're aware, I have taken real heat for repeating your argument on this, where people went out of their minds because I was like, I don't know, I heard this idea. What do you guys think? And people were like, how dare you suggest that? And I was like, it's just an idea. I don't know if it's a good idea.
It doesn't fit their prejudices. And well, anyway, the long and the short of it is that eventually this professor published an enormous paper about this in 2017, which was with huge number of co-authors from all around the world. Beijing University was the lead author and things like that, and said, it's a huge effect. 70% of it is caused by carbon dioxide increases. The rest is caused by warming or rainfall or synthetic fertilizer or these kind of things. But on net, the world is getting considerably greener. How much by? Well, over 30 years, it's like adding 2 continents the size of the mainland United States worth of green vegetation. So imagine all of Kansas and Texas and everywhere covered in green things. We've added that much green vegetation in twice over in the last 30 years. Now, where have we added it? Well, in the Sahel region of Africa, but also in the tundra, in the northern forest. They're growing faster too. Imagine one extra leaf on a pine tree or something like that, or a bunch of extra leaves on a pine tree. You wouldn't necessarily see it, but it's there. Every year we're growing more green vegetation. Now that's food for insects. It's food for gazelles. It's food for monkeys. It's food for people as well. The reason that the Sahel region, which was thought to be getting drier, is now getting greener. This phenomenon is particularly true in arid areas. So it's a small piece of good news. Now, it may be the case that it's not a good enough piece of good news to outweigh the bad news, and that's what people keep telling me is the case. But they haven't yet produced much good evidence. In fact, they've shown that this phenomenon is likely to go on for several decades, if not more, and that it's resulting in much less use of water per increment of green vegetation that is produced. So it's making crops and things less water hungry as well. So I think this is quite an important piece of news. And do you know what? Now, about 7 years after that original article, do you know what they now say about me? They say, yeah, but of course that's true, but we always knew that was true.
When you have to have burned so much and people have spilled so much ink about how you're terrible, and then it gets evaporated. That's wild. But I mean, I have to say that argument is one of those things that until I heard it, I had never had a way of even thinking about it in a different way. And And just the act of like, well, what happens if you, like you said, what happens if every single tree you have has just one more leaf? What does this change? I don't know, but it's a hell of a lot more fun to think about what does this mean than we know we're all doomed. There's nothing to be done about it. Those people over there need to change, and we all know it. Let's yell about it. I can become completely intoxicated with new ideas. And I think my biggest challenge in life, particularly if I'm, if I find one of your books, I almost find myself being defenseless of like, is this a real idea? Is this a good idea? Because I'm just happy playing with them. It doesn't, people aren't living and dying based on whether or not I believe in global greening.
Thanks so much for watching this Vance Crowe Podcast short. If you're interested in learning how to get better at communication, everything from getting rid of those uhs and ums in your conversation to figuring out ways to be more engaging, how to listen better, how to react, and how to create those kind of conversations where people really open up to you, then I recommend signing up for the Articulate Ventures Network. The beta testers are in there now. They're telling me which classes work, which formats work. But in 2 weeks, I'm going to be opening it up to podcast listeners. So if you'd like to be on that list, send me an email to vance@vancecrowe.com and we'll get you on the list so you can join the network when we get it started in just 2 weeks. Thanks so much.